Most advice about eye health starts and ends with carrots, and while there's a kernel of truth in that old advice, it's really only a small piece of a much bigger picture. Today, I want to introduce you to three specific nuts that have real, published research behind their connection to eye health, not vague good-for-you claims, but specific mechanisms tied to specific eye conditions, including one study you're going to want to remember. I'll walk you through exactly why each nut matters, what condition it specifically helps protect against, how much you'd actually need to eat to get a meaningful benefit, and how to build these into your daily routine without it feeling like a chore. Let's start with why diet matters for your eyes in the first place. Your eyes, and specifically the retina at the back of your eye, are remarkably vulnerable to a type of cellular damage called oxidative stress. The retina processes an enormous amount of light and oxygen relative to its size, and that process naturally generates unstable molecules called free radicals as a byproduct. Over time, if the eye doesn't have enough antioxidant protection to neutralize these free radicals, they contribute to damage that's strongly linked to two of the most common age-related eye conditions: cataracts, which is a clouding of the eye's natural lens, and age-related macular degeneration, often shortened to AMD, which damages the macula, the part of the retina responsible for your sharp central vision. AMD in particular is one of the leading causes of vision loss in older adults. The reason diet matters so much here is that several nutrients your body can't produce on its own, including specific antioxidants and healthy fats, play a direct measurable role in protecting against this damage, and nuts happen to be an unusually concentrated source of several of them at once. Let's get into the first nut, and this is the one with genuinely exciting recent research behind it: pistachios. A study conducted by researchers at Tufts University, supported by the American pistachio growers, looked specifically at a measurement called macular pigment optical density, often abbreviated MPOD. This measurement reflects how much protective pigment is present in the macula, and that pigment is made up largely of two plant compounds called lutein and zeaxanthin, which work like a pair of built-in sunglasses for your retina, absorbing harmful blue and near-ultraviolet light before it can damage the delicate cells beneath. In the study, participants who incorporated a daily serving of about 2 ounces of unsalted, dry-roasted pistachios into their diet saw a measurable improvement in their macular pigment density after just 6 weeks. That's a remarkably short time frame for a dietary change to show a measurable protective effect, and it's part of why this particular piece of research has gotten so much attention. The lead researcher on that study noted that pistachios provided a meaningful boost toward the recommended daily intake of lutein, which most people in the general population fall short of getting enough of through diet alone. Higher macular pigment density is associated with better protection against the light-related damage believed to contribute to AMD over time, which is exactly why this nut earns the top spot on this list. The second nut is walnuts, and the mechanism here is a little different but just as well supported. Walnuts are one of the richest plant-based sources of omega-3 fatty acids, specifically a type called alpha-linolenic acid, or ALA. Omega-3 fatty acids are a major structural component of the cell membranes throughout your retina, meaning your retina literally requires a steady supply of these fats to maintain and repair its own cellular structure. Beyond that structural role, omega-3s have a well-documented anti-inflammatory effect throughout the body, and chronic low-grade inflammation is increasingly understood to play a role in the progression of AMD and dry eye conditions. Walnuts are also a strong source of vitamin E, another antioxidant that helps protect cell membranes, including in the eye, from oxidative damage. Research looking at diets higher in omega-3 fatty acids has associated this pattern with a reduced risk of AMD progression, particularly when that intake comes from whole food sources like walnuts and fatty fish, rather than isolated supplements. A small daily handful, roughly a quarter cup, is a commonly cited practical serving size that fits easily into a daily routine. The third nut is almonds, and this one earns its place primarily through its exceptionally high vitamin E content. Among all commonly eaten nuts, almonds contain one of the highest concentrations of vitamin E per serving. Vitamin E is a fat-soluble antioxidant that plays a particularly important role in protecting the lens of the eye from oxidative damage, which is directly relevant to cataract development. Population-level research has associated higher dietary vitamin E intake with a reduced risk of cataracts, and while a single food is never solely responsible for something as complex as cataract development, almonds are one of the most concentrated, accessible whole food sources of this specific protective nutrient. A small handful, similarly around a quarter cup, provides a meaningful portion of a day's vitamin E needs in a single, simple snack. Now, here's an important honesty check before we go further, because I don't want to overstate what 3 nuts alone can do. None of these foods reverse existing vision loss, treat a diagnosed eye disease, or replace regular eye exams. What the research actually supports is that consistent intake of these specific nutrients over time is associated with a reduced risk of some of the underlying damage processes that contribute to common age-related eye conditions. This is a preventive, supportive role, not a treatment, and it's most effective as part of a broader diet pattern rather than as an isolated fix. With that said, let's talk about how these 3 nuts fit alongside other eye-supportive foods because they work best in combination rather than in isolation. Leafy greens like spinach and kale are, alongside pistachios, one of the richest sources of lutein and zeaxanthin. So pairing a handful of pistachios with a spinach salad meaningfully compounds the benefit we discussed earlier. Citrus fruits are rich in vitamin C, another antioxidant that research has linked to reduced cataract risk, working through a somewhat different pathway than vitamin E, but toward a similar protective goal. And fatty fish like salmon or sardines provide the same omega-3 fatty acids we discussed with walnuts in an even more readily used form for the body, making them a strong complementary addition on days you're not having walnuts. None of this means you need to overhaul your entire diet. It means that if you're already trying to build a generally healthy eating pattern, as we discussed in our blood sugar video, you're likely already supporting your eye health at the same time, and adding these 3 nuts specifically sharpens that support even further. Let's talk about practical serving sizes and how to actually build this into a daily routine, since knowing the research matters less than actually doing something with it consistently. A simple approach, a small daily handful of walnuts or almonds, roughly a quarter cup, works well as a mid-morning or mid-afternoon snack on its own or paired with a piece of fruit. Pistachios work particularly well as an evening snack since the shelling process itself tends to naturally slow down how quickly you eat them, which some nutrition researchers have noted may be part of why they're associated with better portion control compared to other nuts. You don't need to eat all 3 every single day. Rotating through them across the week or combining a mix of all 3 into a small trail mix with no added sugar are both realistic ways to get consistent exposure to all 3 sets of nutrients without it feeling repetitive. Let's clear up a few myths, because these are exactly the beliefs that cause people to either overestimate or underestimate what dietary changes like this can do. Myth 1. Carrots are the single best food for your eyes. Carrots do contain beta-carotene, which the body converts to vitamin A, important for the light-sensing cells in your eye. But as we've covered today, several other nutrients, lutein, zeaxanthin, omega-3s, and vitamin E, are just as important and are found in much higher concentrations in foods like the nuts we've discussed, leafy greens, and citrus. Myth 2. If I take a supplement with these nutrients, I don't need to worry about food sources. Research has generally found that nutrients from whole foods tend to be at least as effective, and sometimes more effective, than isolated supplements, likely because whole foods deliver these compounds alongside other cooperating nutrients and fats that support absorption. This isn't a reason to avoid supplements if a doctor has recommended them for a specific diagnosed deficiency, but it is a reason not to assume a supplement alone covers everything food does. Myth 3. Once I notice vision changes, diet can't help anymore. While diet doesn't reverse existing structural damage, several long-term studies have found that dietary patterns rich in these specific nutrients are associated with a slower rate of progression even in people who already have early-stage AMD, which is exactly why an eye doctor may bring up nutrition even after a diagnosis, not just before one. I do want to be direct about something important. None of what we've covered today replaces regular eye exams, and this is worth taking seriously because several of the most common age-related eye conditions, including glaucoma and early AMD, often have no noticeable symptoms in their earliest and most treatable stages. An annual comprehensive eye exam, even if your vision feels completely normal, is one of the only reliable ways to catch these conditions early, when intervention tends to be most effective. If you do notice any sudden vision changes, blurriness, dark spots, straight lines appearing wavy, or a sudden loss of vision in part of your visual field, that warrants a prompt visit to an eye doctor rather than waiting for your next scheduled exam, since sudden changes can indicate something requiring urgent attention. To bring this together, pistachios provide a concentrated, well-researched source of lutein and zeaxanthin that directly supports macular pigment density, with real evidence of measurable improvement in as little as 6 weeks. Walnuts provide omega-3 fatty acids and vitamin E that support your retina's cellular structure and help counter the inflammation linked to AMD progression. And almonds provide one of the most concentrated dietary sources of vitamin E, supporting the lens of the eye against the oxidative damage linked to cataracts. None of these are a cure, and none of them replace regular eye exams, but the research behind each one is genuinely specific and genuinely encouraging, especially compared to how vague most "eat this for your eyes" advice tends to be. Subscribe for more evidence-based health content, and I'll see you in the next one.